Supreme Lord, eternal truth, let us obey thee alone and live according to truth. Mother and Sri Aurobindo, my refuge. So, welcome all of you. Today we are going to discuss the most important topic. This important, why it is important? Because without it, the success of sadhana is next to impossible. This is actually we are going to discuss today is divine grace. Grace of the divine. We are going to discuss in a brief manner about the divine grace. For this sadhana, the grace of the Divine Mother and on our side, an inner state made up of faith, sincerity and surrender is genuinely required. That's what Sri Aurobindo stresses upon. Before going to the topic, we must try to read two good messages of the Mother. First one is, for nobody, sadhana will be possible without the Divine's help. The grace is always ready to act, but it must not let it work nor resist in its action. The one condition required is faith. So for this sadhana, definitely the most important the requirement is this grace of the Divine Mother. We should not resist it. We should allow it to act in a smooth manner, but thing is that we must have on our side, definitely we should have the faith. Second message of the Divine Mother we want to go through. We must learn to rely on the divine grace. We must learn to rely on the divine grace and to call for its help in all circumstances. Then it will work out constant miracles. If we are able to know it, we can be able to trust it. Or if we will, under all circumstances, if we will be able to call the divine grace, then naturally it will calm down, it will work, and the miracle will happen. Now itself, we are going to know some of the important observations, important tricks on the divine grace as reviewed, as given by the Mother and Sri Aurobindo. Initially, mostly we are going to read today of the Sri Aurobindo's message on grace. Grace is not an invention, it is in fact a spiritual experience. Krupa, that is Krupa. So you have to do and you have to get it. Kru means not the physical work, whatever we are doing, this spiritual endeavor, how long we will be doing and proceeding, that experience we will be gaining, that is our grace. It is not an invention, it is there. So we have to discover it. It is a spiritual experience. Strength is all for the strong, but aspiration and grace answering to it is not altogether myths. They are great realities in the spiritual life. So far spiritual life is concerned, strength, everything is alright. Sri Aurobindo says, for the strong, strength, that is obstinately it is there with the strong. But aspiration and grace, two things he says, aspiration and grace answering to it is not altogether myths. This is not the story or this is the myth. They are great realities in the spiritual life. Number 3, strength. If that is spiritual, strength that is with the strong solely. Strength, if it is spiritual, if the strength is of course spiritual, then naturally what will happen? The power for spiritual realization. The power for spiritual realization is a greater power, a greater power is sincerity. The greatest is the grace. Sri Aurobindo, it is a very nice observation as given by Sri Aurobindo. Strength, it is if it is spiritual. If the strength that is having, that is with the strong people, strength if it is spiritual is a power for spiritual realization. If the strength, three things he speaks of. First one is strength, second one is sincerity, third one is grace. Strength, If it is spiritual, if not spiritual, then if it is just mechanical or physical, that counts not at all. If it is spiritual, that strength is a power of spiritual relation. This is a great power for the spiritual relation. Second thing Sri Aurobindo speaks, if it is great, then the greater willpower will be sincerity. So this sadhana, sincerity is greater than strength. The greatest one is grace. Among these three, I mean strength, second one is sincerity, third one is grace. The grace is the most important one and the greatest one. The divine grace is an action from above. The grace comes from above. The divine grace is an action from above and from within, independent of mental causes, which decides in its own movement. Divine grace comes from the top. So there are two powers that effect and then their conjunction, the great and difficult thing, which is the aim of our endeavor. From the below, there must be a call. From the above, there must be a sanction. The power that mediates between the sanction and the call. From the below, we have to call, and from the answer will come from above. The power that mediates between the sanction and call is the presence and power of the Divine Mother. So this Divine Mother, her grace is required for realization, materialization of this sadhana, because without it, sadhana is not at all possible. So divine grace is an action from the above or from within, from above or from within, because in within, psychic being is well seated behind the heart. So independent of mental causes, it does not depend upon mental causes, because it is all spiritual, it is all psychic seated, psychic being, it is well seated behind our heart, which decides its own movement. So mentality, mental phenomenon has nothing to do here. This is sadhana and for the divine grace to work. The special grace, another point here with the special grace. Special grace of the divine is for the seekers of the divine. Special grace is required because that for the special grace, ordinary people, they don't have the idea, they don't have the requirement, they don't know its utility. So the special grace of the divine is for the seekers of the divine. Those people those sadhakas, they seek for the divine, or rather they are seekers of the divine. For them, special grace is required. For others, it is the cosmic will acting through their karma. For this, karmavad and all, So, for the others, for the spiritual seekers, the special grace of the divine is required. For others, it is the cosmic will acting through their karma. So they go by karmavad, and these people who are seeking the spiritual divine, for them special grace is required. Divine grace is essential for success in sadhana, because particularly whatever we are tracing upon and we are doing, that is integral yoga. This transformation is important. The object of this sadhana, integral yoga, is transformation and perfection. So for that one, the divine grace and powers can do everything. Here speaks of the divine grace is essential for the success in sadhana. Without the divine grace, sadhana can't be successful. But it is the practice that prepares the descent of the grace. So continuously we have to keep practicing. As long as we practice, as deep as we practice, as much as we practice, then this divine grace comes and its descent becomes so that much prominent and possible. The divine grace and power can do everything. Two powers, one divine grace and a divine power, can do everything, but with the full assent of the sadhaka. It comes, it surrounds, it stands beside us. So we have to call it to work, we have to pray it for its work, so that if we can be able to consent, necessary for the sadhana, consent of the divine grace and the consent of the sadhaka is necessary for this sadhana. That is, two things that are absolutely required is the divine grace and divine power. The supreme grace, then another grace, divine grace, special grace, then supreme grace will act only in the conditions of the light and the truth. in the perversity, in obscurity, in the falsehood, it will never work. The supreme grace will act only in the conditions of the light and the truth. It will not act in conditions laid down by the supreme. Because if it wills to work in the obscurity or in the falsehood, it would defeat its own purpose. So for the grace to act, absolutely requirement is that the conditions of the light and the truth. The more one develops in psychic, the more it is possible for the grace to act. So if we can be able to lead an spiritual life, an inner life, we can be introvert, we can live in the spirit. If we know and aspire for the psychic prominency, then naturally that is more possible for the grace to act. If you open your side to one part of the truth and another side are constantly opening the gates to hostile forces, then it is vague to expect that the divine grace to act with you. So always only truth, only right, only supreme consciousness, these are the sides. The opposite sides, this darkness, this obscurity, it will actually prohibit, it will resist to the work. So on the only positive side, truth, light, everything, the divine grace will come, and we have to open to the light, not to the darkness, towards the truth, not towards the falsehood, towards the supreme consciousness, not towards the inconscient or nascent. In each time the power intervenes and brings in the truth, you turn your back on it and call in again the falsehood that has been expelled. It is not the divine grace that you must blame for failing you, but the falsity of your own will and the imperfection of your own surrender. When the sadhaka grows in sadhana, these negative forces, negative things get expelled. So after getting expelled, it has to go. Suppose this sadhaka is actually once again attracting it, then naturally there will be failure. So for that failure we should blame ourselves, not the supreme grace. The more complete your faith, sincerity and surrender, the more and grace be more and the more the grace and protection be with you. So we must have amplitude of faith, full amplitude of faith, sincerity and surrender, so that the grace and protection be with you, and we will go in this simple straightforward manner. When we go in a safe periphery, will stay. Few are those, very important observation, very important message. Few are those from whom the grace withdraws. The given grace withdraws, but their number is few. But many are those who withdraw from the grace. Sunshine is there, light and heat is there, but actually we are coming inside the house. We are enclosing it, the doors and windows, and sitting under the fan or AC. Naturally, we are pushing ourselves away from the light and truth, but actually truth and the heat, it is there as usual in the outside premises. So many are those who withdraw from the grace, but few are those from whom the grace withdraws. Whole the way, the grace is one side, this unlucky, they are also staying in another side. It does not select the righteous and reject the sinner. Though grace is everything, the grace is same for all. It does not select the righteous and reject the sin as the sunlight, as the wind, like this. God's grace is more difficult to have or to keep than nectar of the immortals. It is actually when the God's grace, another point is God's grace, when it is coming, it is more difficult to have or keep. It comes, but actually we are incapable of receiving it than the nectar for the immortals. The grace of the Divine Mother is the sanction of the Supreme, but whenever she gives the grace, then it is the sanction of the Supreme. Now or tomorrow its effect is sure, a thing decreed, inevitable and irresistible. Lastly, Sri Aurobindo speaks, the difference between knowledge and ignorance is the grace of the Spirit. Thank you.